The room had no light, just a flickering beep, hollow, mechanical, merciless. It wasn't a heart monitor. It wasn't a ringtone. It was the sound of a call that went unanswered. On the other end of the line, Michael Madsen's voice cracked into silence. This was the man who once roared through bullets and blood on the silver screen, but tonight his breath trembled, barely human, the sound of a father calling into the void. It was January 22. Hudson Madsen, his youngest son, had taken his own life. 26 years old, a U.S. Army veteran, a boy who once called Michael the greatest father in the world. And yet, when Michael needed someone to answer, there was no one left. Not family, not friends, certainly not Hollywood. That call wasn't just a desperate attempt to reach a dying son. It was a scream for help. A final flare sent up from the ruins of a man crushed under years of loss, addiction, and silence. But Hollywood didn't speak of it. They never do. Just like they didn't speak of the quiet exile they forced him into. The debts, the DUIs, the roles that shrank from legend to low budget. There's a scandal no one in Hollywood will admit. Not because it's extraordinary, but because it happens every day. A talent drained, a rebel crushed, a man who gave everything to the industry and was left with nothing but a voicemail unheard. This is not the story of a failed actor. This is the story of a father, a fighter, and the final call that no one dared to answer. Michael Madsen didn't arrive in this world as a Hollywood outlaw. He was born into a quiet storm, long before the cameras rolled. It was September 25th, 1957 in Chicago, a city that echoed with sirens, smoke, and broken promises. His mother, Elaine, was a poet and filmmaker, a dreamer wrapped in the skin of a warrior. His father, Calvin, a firefighter who believed in order and obedience. But love? It was a language rarely spoken in that house. Michael was the middle child. Not quite the oldest, not quite the baby, just in between. Invisible, sometimes. While his younger sister, Virginia Madsen, would one day charm the world with her grace and talent, Michael was different. He wasn't polished. He wasn't soft. He didn't fit. And because he didn't fit, he learned to fight. School was a battlefield. He struggled not with intellect, but with confinement. Rules were cages. Desks were chains. Teachers looked at him as if he were a ticking bomb. And maybe he was. At home, his parents split. Love fractured, like old glass. Michael drifted between households, never truly belonging to either one. As a teenager, he sought out shadows. He hung around tattoo parlors and back alleys, his heart thumping to the rhythm of motorcycles and misfits. But behind the scowl and leather jacket was a boy desperate for someone, anyone, to see him. Not the troublemaker. Not the lost cause. Just him. He found brief solace working at a gas station, then at a hospital, cleaning beds, changing sheets, inhaling the scent of endings and goodbyes. That job, morbid, silent, human, would stay with him. In those corridors of death and recovery, Michael Madsen learned something that would never leave him. Everyone is carrying something, and most people drop it quietly. By the time he discovered acting, he wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing meaning. A way to scream without breaking the world around him. A way to finally be heard. Fate doesn't knock politely on doors. Sometimes it crashes through them, wild and loud and unexpected. For Michael Madsen, it came in the form of a man named Quentin Tarantino. Before the world ever whispered his name in red carpets and cult circles, Michael was just another struggling actor, wrestling small roles and swallowing rejection. He studied under John Malkovich at the Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago, the same place that birthed legends. But Hollywood? Hollywood didn't care for men like him. He was too rough, too real, too unwilling to play the game. Then came Reservoir Dogs. Tarantino, the young madman of cinema, saw something in Michael that others had missed or feared. A quiet rage, a poetic violence, a depth that lived just beneath the eyes. He cast Madsen as Mr. Blonde, the charming psychopath with a razor and a rhythm. And just like that, Michael Madsen wasn't invisible anymore. That scene, you know the one? Stuck in the middle with you, a dance, a blade, a scream. It wasn't just acting. It was catharsis. It was every silent war Michael had fought, now lit on fire for the world to watch. People were shocked, terrified, mesmerized. But Michael? He felt alive. That role changed everything. Offers came in, big ones. Studios finally wanted him. But only on their terms. They wanted the villain, the killer, the tortured soul. Not the man who wrote poetry at night and cried over old photographs of his children. Still for a moment, the lights were on. And Michael Madsen, the boy from the shadows, stood center stage, burning, beautiful, and finally seen. For a brief electric moment in the 1990s, Michael Madsen was not just part of Hollywood. He was Hollywood, but not the clean, polished Hollywood of movie stars and perfect teeth. No. He was the other kind, the kind that bled, smoked, cursed, and made everything feel more alive. After Reservoir Dogs, the doors flung open. Michael became the go-to man for roles that danced on the edge of madness. He wasn't acting rage. He wore it like a second skin. His presence was magnetic, unpredictable, dangerous, poetic. Directors knew that when Madsen stepped on set, something real, something uncontrollable, might happen. He worked with the giants: Quentin Tarantino, Oliver Stone, Ridley Scott. He shared the screen with Al Pacino, John Travolta, Daryl Hannah. Films like The Getaway, Donnie Brasco, Species, and Kill Bill cemented him as a cinematic outlaw. He didn't just play bad men. He made you understand them. But behind the camera, something even more powerful was happening. Michael Madsen became a symbol. The rebel who never conformed. The poet with a knife behind his back. The man who could stare into the heart of violence and still quote Shakespeare. He attended Cannes in a black suit and dark sunglasses, his hair slicked back, cigarette in hand, the living embodiment of noir. Journalists called him Hollywood's last real tough guy. Tarantino once said casting him was like lighting a fuse. Women adored him, men feared him. Studios wanted to package him, but he refused to be boxed. Fame, though, is a seductive liar. It flatters while it feeds. Michael didn't crave the red carpets or the money. What he wanted was to be taken seriously, not just as a performer, but as a human being. He published poetry. He raised a family. He tried to be a father, a husband, a son, even as the world only saw a madman with a gun. The applause grew louder, the lights burned brighter, but somewhere inside, the boy from Chicago still stood alone, hands in his pockets waiting for someone to tell him it was okay to sit down. Fame never falls gently. It slips, crashes, devours, and it doesn't apologize. For Michael Madsen, the applause eventually faded into static. The roles grew smaller, the sets more obscure. Hollywood, once drunk on his danger, sobered up and looked away. He had become a ghost of his own mythology, called only when a director wanted the Madsen edge, but never the man himself. The cracks began to show. Behind the sunglasses and growl was a man staggering beneath the weight of debt, broken relationships, and addictions that never fully went away. His rugged charm turned haggard. His name, once headlining indie gold, began appearing in the credits of forgettable films. Background noise. In a career that once roared, he filed for bankruptcy, got arrested. In 2012, a DUI sent him to rehab. It wasn't his first, and wouldn't be his last. The industry shrugged. They had already moved on, chasing younger rebels with cleaner records. Michael was no longer dangerous. He was inconvenient. But the most devastating blow came far from any studio lot. In January 2022, his son Hudson, a 26-year-old veteran of the U.S. Army, died by suicide. No headlines could capture that pain. No camera could frame it. This wasn't a plot twist. This was heartbreak, raw and bottomless. Michael's world collapsed. The boy he had raised, the boy he had loved, gone. Days later, Michael was hospitalized himself, under mental evaluation. The man who once sliced off ears on screen was now drowning off camera. Alone, unheard, unraveling, and still Hollywood said nothing. No tribute, no call, no lifeline. In the city of stars, when you stop shining, they don't dim the lights. They simply stop looking. There are some wounds that never close. They don't heal with time. They simply learn how to breathe, quietly, painfully, persistently. Michael Madsen did not rise like a phoenix. There was no triumphant montage, no glittering comeback. What came instead was something far more human: survival. After the death of his son, the air around him changed. He spoke less, appeared rarely. The man who once devoured the screen with every glare now walked softly, as if carrying something too fragile to name. But he didn't disappear. He returned to independent film, not for the money, but for the craft, for the silence between takes, for the moments when he could disappear into a character and forget the ache behind his eyes. He published more poetry, darker now, more honest. He wrote about grief the way a soldier writes about war, not for the world, but for himself. His other children remained his tether to life. He spoke of them often, called them his reason for breathing. He tried to stay present, tried to be the kind of father he hadn't always known how to be, and in his quiet reappearance, something extraordinary happened. A generation that had missed his rise began to find him. Young actors spoke his name with reverence. Fans shared clips of his performances, calling him the most underrated actor of the 90s. A new cult following grew, not around the scandal, but around the soul. Michael Madsen did not become a Hollywood darling, but he became something rarer, a survivor who didn't lie about the cost of survival. He still bore the scars, but he didn't hide them. He carried them into every frame, every verse, every breath. And in doing so, he became not just a legend, but a mirror. Legends are rarely carved from marble. They are chiseled from chaos, from pain, defiance, and the silence that follows applause. Michael Madsen may never have won an Oscar. He may never have stood atop the Hollywood machine, smiling for the cameras. But his legacy was never meant to be gold-plated. It was meant to be real. He became the face of a generation of men who couldn't cry, so they bled. He gave voice to the villains, the broken, the ones too wild to be heroes, but too human to be forgotten. In a town obsessed with reinvention, Madsen never pretended. He was what he showed: fierce, flawed, full of fire. For every actor who's been told they're too rough, too strange, too much, Michael Madsen stands like a shadow in their corner, whispering, "Let them look away. You don't need their light to burn." He leaves behind a body of work that doesn't sparkle. It scars. A trail of performances that may never be mainstream, but will always be unforgettable. And beyond the screen, he leaves behind the poetry, the pain, the love for his children, and the unbearable ache of one son gone too soon. Michael Madsen is not a cautionary tale. He is the proof that some fires refuse to die, even when no one's watching, And when the final lights of Hollywood fade, somewhere in the dark, his voice will still echo, unpolished,